Everyone, I want to say thank you, first of all, for making it out here today. My name is Daniel Scott. I'm the Executive Director of Southern Oregon Climate Action now. And I want to first acknowledge all of the SOCAN volunteers that helped put all this together, in particular the Candidate Forum Planning Committee that was manned by Alan Hallmark, Estelle Valaire, Christine Haney, Alan Journay, and myself, as well as the other orange shirts that you see scattered around the room that helped kind of direct everyone and make sure we can really have a great event tonight. I also want to thank my development associate / slide manager, Isabella Lee Tibbetts, for managing the slides for me so I don't have to try and play clicker as well. We also have David Hampton on sound, and we have Wanda Borland, our videographer, and then we have Delcy Tibbetts managing the sound today, or the time. As a reminder, if you haven't done questions yet, there's still a chance. Just put your hand up and we'll have a volunteer walk by. And also to clarify, SOCAN is a 501c3 nonprofit, and as such, we cannot endorse any candidate for office. Why we host this event is to stay true to SOCAN's mission, which is education first. I think that questions are valuable always, because the simple act of asking a question is to say, I don't know something, but I would like to know. So we're really happy to have this forum here where the audience or SOCAN can ask questions and we can all be a little better off for it. I also want to make note that all candidates for Jackson County Board of Commissioners, Oregon Senate District 2, House Districts 4, 5, and 6, and Oregon Congressional District 2 were all invited to participate in the forum today. They all received the same written request and phone call, and all of the candidates that you do not see here either declined to attend or chose not to respond at all, and the candidates who did accept are, of course, here beside me. Scattered around the room during our meet and greet, you will find different pods for each of the candidates. We'll be doing a meet and greet after the lion's share of the program today. I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end. So thank you all again for being here. We really appreciate it. If the audience wasn't here, it would probably just be me and Alan asking questions and no one would be having fun. And so it's great to have an audience here, and I'm sure that the candidates are excited to be able to talk about what we have in store for you tonight. This topic tonight will be focused on climate and the environment. All of our questions will be based on that frame. And then I have a few housekeeping announcements. If you haven't done so already, please put your phones on stun, also known as silenced. So I'm sure your ringtones are beautiful, but we don't need to hear them while the candidates are speaking. Secondly, if we can ask the audience to hold your applause and or vocal expressions until the end, we will have time for applause, but we really want to maximize the time that we have with these candidates and the questions that we have prepared for them. And a third housekeeping, the restrooms are back out the door, down the hallway. You'll see them on the left side, and there are bathroom codes posted on the back table over there, should you so need. All right. So the format today, we are going to be doing a firm 2-hour schedule. The candidates will all have 2 minutes to do their opening remarks. We will move on to questions at 1.5 minutes apiece, and then we will do closing remarks at the end. We have a timekeeper in the very front who will be helping us manage the time. She has a sign that says 30 seconds and a sign that says stop. When we get to the stop, please finish your sentence, not your paragraph. If I sense that you're starting a new sentence, I will jump in and stop you so we can maintain time. And then, as I mentioned, afterward, the main part of the program ends, and then we'll move on to a meet and greet. The candidates have graciously devoted some of their time to a more informal kind of question and answer, getting to know them a little better. Maybe you have a follow-up question or something that comes up during our time here together. Perfect. And then next up, I guess, is to start it out. I will be introducing the candidates down the line. Again, please hold your applause until I have introduced all of the candidates. Starting first to my left, we have candidate Denise Kraus, Democratic nominee for the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. Next, we have candidate Richard Chasm, Democratic nominee for Oregon House District 4. And then we have Representative Pam Marsh, Democratic nominee for Oregon House District 5. Candidate Lilia Cabero, Democratic nominee for Oregon House District 6. candidate Tracy Thompson, Democratic nominee for Oregon Senate District 2, and candidate Dan Ruby, Democratic nominee for Congressional District 2. We'll start with each of the candidates' opening remarks. As a reminder to the candidates, you have 2 minutes for your opening remarks. We'll be starting first here with Denise to my left and then moving down the line.
Okay. Hear me okay? Okay. Well, we have seen polling data about the climate change issue, and what we know from that is that the majority of Jackson County residents are extremely concerned about climate change. What we haven't seen is action taken by Jackson County to address those concerns. So one of the first things that I want to do as your new Jackson County Commissioner is to develop a climate action plan. And I know that other towns are already doing it. They've already got one, or they're in process of doing one. And Jackson County is late to the game, but it's better sooner than later. So I want to definitely take an active role in that. Secondly, I want to get more involved with the Rogue County the Rogue Valley Council of Governments, or RVCOG, because that's a really great organization that collaborates across cities and counties on numerous projects. They have a very strong natural resources program, and I would like county to take a very active role in those projects that benefit and address the environmental concerns. And then also, if you may know that county has several advisory committee groups, advisory committees. They have the Public Health Advisory Committee, they have the Animal Control Advisory Committee, and they used to have the Natural Resources Advisory Committee. But that was disbanded by the county commissioners several years ago. And I know that I don't know everything, and I want to invite expert opinion into the conversation. I want to reestablish the Natural Resources Advisory Committee, and I want to populate it with people who are the experts in the field, people who have the knowledge and training to address these issues.
Thank you much. And next up, we have Richard Chasm.
Good evening. Nice looking crowd. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm not well known in Jackson County at all, but I'm extremely well known in Douglas County. This district stretches from Camas Valley to Jacksonville. It's bigger than Connecticut. In traveling around the county and talking to people, the 3 main concerns I hear over and over again are they want money for education, they want better access to health care, and everybody's scared stiff of wildfire. I own 66 acres of land, but I really got started years ago planting trees. We're in a worker-owned co-op, which is ancient history now, but there was a time when it was a major economic force in Southern Oregon. The whole issue of environmentalism is to think globally and act locally. Now, I've planted over 250,000 seedling trees with these 2 hands, the ones over here, from Elkton to Glendale. When I look around and I see the forest fires, the lack of seedlings, the lack of quality seedlings, the lack of crews to go out and plant the trees, this is going to be my #1 priority at the legislature, is to have local nurseries with not just the trees, but the plants that go along with the trees, and the crews to go out and plant them. It's our best active means to affect the climate in Southern Oregon. Wildfire is another issue, but reforestation is something that I know about.
Thank you much. Representative Marsh.
Thank you. I'm going to stand up so I can see everybody. Good evening. I'm Pam Marsh. I am running for my 5th term in the Oregon legislature. I represent District 5, which is Southern Jackson County, the communities of the Green Springs, Ashland, Talent, Phoenix, a little corner of Medford as you take a big left turn and go out and include Jacksonville and the Applegate south of 238. So if you're in one of those places, you're in my district, and if you are in the balance of Medford, you are in my friend Lilia's district, and you'll be hearing from her shortly. When I ran in 2016, I talked about climate change as being my highest priority, because if you're in a rural-ish area and your eyes are opened, you're seeing it in the form of reduced snowpack, of drought, persistent habitat changes. And so I ran, I got elected. I had no idea that in 2018 we would see 6 weeks of choking smoke, and then in 2020 we would see climate change in the form of wildfire that coursed across our communities. My district lost 2,400 homes, and of those homes, 1,500 of those homes were manufactured homes where our most vulnerable residents live. So what we know here in the Rogue Valley is that climate change is real, it is present, and is targeting our most vulnerable residents. I have acted upon what I've observed as chair of the Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee. In 2021, I championed 100% clean electricity, which sets us on a course toward 100% clean electricity by 2040. I followed that up with legislation to establish resilient communities. I have worked broadly on the wildfire issue, trying to figure out how we both prevent wildfire, that is, keep our communities as safe as possible, and at the same time take big steps to make sure that when disaster strikes, we are really ready to deal with it. There is a tremendous amount of work on this front. It's one of the highest priorities that I have. I also work a lot in housing, and I'm eager to continue the work.
Perfect, thank you. Next up, we have Lily Calavera.
So I'm also going to get up because that way I get to see everybody's beautiful faces. Thank you. My name is Lidia Caballero. Thank you for being here and giving some of your afternoon to listen to us. So I might not be well known. I know where I've been known, and I don't know how your faces. But anyway, just so you know a little bit about me, I have lived in this valley for over 30 years, and I raised my family here. And I have been working for the Metro Police Department for the last 17 years as the community outreach coordinator. So I'm very in the community a lot. And also, I volunteered for the last 9 years as the Metro School Board District, as the director of the Metro School Board. And one of the main reasons is education. Education is the key to success. That's my mentality. So, you know, I've been thinking a lot about the question, and I did a lot of research, and I go around and around about all the information I have found. And the main one that I think of is about education. The fact that climate change, it might be or not be, it is a fact. But we have a lot of people out there who does not realize, they don't know that it is actually always happening somewhere else. It's not happening here. Like I said, I've been here over 30 years. And 15, 20 years ago, I wasn't worried about fires. You know, it was a beautiful place, still a beautiful place. So one of the things that I see about this question is that we need to do intentional, caring, respectful outreach to the community who doesn't realize that we have a climate change, that it is a fact. It's not happening somewhere else. It's here all around us. And I think the best way to do it is to create some consciousness on those communities that are not here, like where we are here. And the way to do that, and one of the best ways that I know that it works, is that we need to go where they're already meeting and use this any means of communication so they can understand that it is a reality. Thank you.
Thank you much. Next up, we have Tracy Thompson.
So I'm the new kid on the block here. I haven't been here for more than 5 years. And for me, that brings a new perspective on what we're experiencing, because I have had to deal with finding insurance for my house, which is in a new fire district. And as I have been campaigning, the new fire map is giving a lot of people, no pun intended, heartburn. And we need to address that. When we have the BLM, who's the largest land owner in District 2, which, as Richard said, goes from north of Canyonville all the way down to Central Point. So if the BLM owns the most land, then they should be liable for most of the management. So as a state representative, I want to take on that fight. And hearing that Pam is part of the Environment Climate and Energy Committee, I think that one of the things that we can do is we need to start looking at alternative forms of energy, because we don't have energy production in our area, and it's a problem for a lot of our at-risk folks. And so in terms of my planks outside of climate, it's healthcare, because healthcare is a really big problem. It's impacted by wildfires. People have respiratory illnesses. Education, because if we don't have an educated constituency, we're going to continue to have this sort of poverty that we have here. And third is economic development, and that's an area where I see we can be proactive in managing our forests and natural resources. But there's going to be some pain for all of us, because our water rights are so over-allocated that whether you're a farmer, a rancher, or a small business owner, or even just someone who draws their water off a well, water rights need to be addressed. So there's going to be pain all around for all of us. But I think if we bring it back to the controls locally and basically hold the state and federal government, hold their feet to the fire, I think we can address the climate changes that are affecting us. Thank you.
Thank you much. Next up, we have Dan Ruby.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Ruby. I am a lifelong science educator. I'm a current school board member here in Southern Oregon. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here. I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives in our 2nd Congressional District. It's large. It's about 70,000 square miles, about the size of the state of Washington. It's southern, central, and eastern Oregon. And I spent about a third of my time in the car in the past 3 months talking to folks across the district. It's been a lot of fun. But I want to tell you how I got here. So I started my career teaching elementary school kids about Earth and space science. That moved into helping high school kids plug into where they thrive, whether that's through career and technical education, whether that's to four-year university or two-year community college or apprenticeships and internships in next generation industry. And I got recruited to be the CEO of our science museum here in Southern Oregon, jumped at the chance, and we got one of the first things we worked on under my leadership was we got some funding to do a new national exhibit on climate change, which is the largest science issue facing our globe. And how we experience that in Oregon is through our waters and our forests. One of the components of that is wildfires that are increasingly severe. As Representative Marsh pointed out, that became very real in September of 2020 with the Alameda fire. So normally, here's where I talk about how my career shifted into housing and healthcare and education related to that. But I want to actually talk about a contrast with my opponent. So Cliff Bentz has voted alongside his seatmate Marjorie Taylor Greene against projects and programs that help Oregonians here at home. He has worked against the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement that's super crucial. There's been a lack, he didn't support our bipartisan infrastructure bill that's super needed, and Republicans have a lack of leadership on climate change. I applaud him for being a member of the Conservative Climate Caucus, but they failed to offer any meaningful legislation.
Great, thank you much. Can we get a round of applause for our candidates? We appreciate them being here. To start off, we'll start off with the SOCAN sponsored questions, so this will be the first one. It'll be for each of the candidates, again, going in order, starting with Richard. Well, we want to change it up, that way we allow everyone to be the first person to answer. The question is, should you be elected, what do you think is the single most important thing your representative body could do to ensure an appropriate contribution to solving environmental problems? Please explain why that is your top priority and how you propose to address it. Each candidate will have 90 seconds.
I appreciate Representative Marsh for standing up. I much prefer to speak on my feet. The number one issue is we need to address wildfire. In the last session, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was a request for community forest fighting in preparation of 35 million. It was cut to 3 million. In the short session, the ask was 27 million. It was cut to nothing. That's not acceptable. And you're going to pay for fighting forest fires. The question is, how do you want to do it? And there's things that we can do with community firewise, put crews together of young people that really want to do the work to protect and prepare for these fires. We need to cut brush, we need to clear out along roads, we need to have some burnouts. There's a lot that can be done, and to just cut the budget in Southern Oregon is unacceptable. And if I go to the state legislature, I will raise hell if we don't get the money to fight the forest fires.
Next up, Representative Marsh. And if at any point anyone would like me to repeat the question, please.
Well, with respect to SOCAN, there is no one answer to this question. So I'm sort of going to stake that ground to start with. Clearly, the most important environmental issue in front of us is the climate tumult that we are experiencing, and we have to keep moving forward on two fronts, two complex fronts. One is mitigation. We have to keep doing the work to make sure that we as cultures move toward a state that is using less fossil fuel. We have to follow through with 100% clean electricity and make sure that the utilities are actually doing what they need to meet those parameters. And there's a whole lot of work around transmission and siting and the big energy users in the form of data centers that we have to address as part of that. We also have to stand up for the DEQ, which is doing work with our climate protection program to address other kinds of fossil fuels, specifically natural gas. And the natural gas industry is throwing a big fit, so we have to stand up to the natural gas industry. But we also have to work on adaptation because we've gone too far. We are already seeing people that are suffering because of climate change. We have to make sure that people have safe homes where they can both heat themselves and cool themselves in the summer. We never used to think that in Oregon we had to cool, but now we do. We need to make sure that our forests are as safe as possible. My friend Richard spoke to that earlier. We want to make sure that our communities are resilient so that we can come together and we can manage through emergencies and take care of each other. So lots of work ahead.
Thank you. Lily?
Okay. Well, básicamente, my Spanish came out, basically. My brain. Basically, you know, like I said, I did a little bit of research, well, quite a bit, and I go back to the same point. I like what you said earlier, the SOCAN is about education, and I think, I mean, I don't deny the fact that we do have an issue regarding the climate change, regarding the fires, regarding the dryness that we have, you know, not enough water. But what I get to the point is, when I attended this event that it was, you guys had it, who had it, you guys went, and that's when I started opening my eyes that this is a way to reach out to the community and make them aware that this is not a joke. It is, like I said earlier, it's not happening somewhere else, it's happening all over, especially here. And we need to care for the place that we live, because this is where we can make an impact, and this is where we can make a difference. And so I believe that reaching out to the community and the places they already gather and provide any means of ways that they can understand this is a reality. I noticed that in this event, that we did an exercise, and my exercise was to talk to another couple to see about climate change and how can they affect them. And they said, well, it doesn't affect us because we rent, and the benefits that it can provide. I said, even if the owner of the house gets a new heat pump, or I said, you are gonna benefit indirectly because your electricity bill is gonna be a lot lower. You might not think about it, but it is, again, it's about education and making awareness and making people aware and conscious that all of us get affected.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Much. Next up, we have Tracy.
Well, I'm going to stand up too since I'm the tallest. So, I mean, Richard and Pam have already addressed some of the critical issues, so I'm not going to beat those horses, but they're absolutely right in that wildfires is a very, very critical threat that has to be addressed in the near term, for the simple reason that those burned forests affect our rivers, affect our land values, impact other environmental aspects such as tourism. So that's one that has to be addressed first and foremost. But I don't think that we can look at these things in isolation. We live in these holistic systems. And so we have to look at how our energy is being provided. I don't know how many of you remember the 10 plus days of 100 plus degree weather we had. Well, all that means is the air conditioning goes up, and Pacific Power is going to generate more electricity, which comes primarily from fossil fuels. So we do have to mitigate that, but I think more importantly, we have to be proactive and look where things are going and not just deal with where we are today. We have to anticipate where this is going in the next 10, 15 years, because I think as Alan would confirm, it's changing a lot faster than we expected, than the models have predicted. And I've done some deep dives in Alan's stuff. I tell you, it's pretty data dense and even above my pay grade. So my mom would be happy to know that, she said, you don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room, so she can rest assured that that's not the case here today. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you much. Then we have Dan Ruby.
Thank you. It's on? Oh, thank you. So, we all agree that we need to do better on wildfire and water issues. We are not going to do better meaningfully unless we also acknowledge that climate change is human-caused and happening and take action on it. And from a federal level, there's a lot of action we can take on it. First, I would pick up 5 pieces of legislation forwarded by progressive colleague, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So it's recognizing the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal. Green New Deal for public schools, build green infrastructure and jobs. Green New Deal for public housing, and implement a civilian climate corps for jobs and justice. We rejoined the Paris Accord, thank you, Joe Biden, but it needs to be stronger, and there's some things we can do about that from within the Paris Accord. We can focus on the how and not the what. So right now we have targets, but we don't have pathways. So building the pathways is important. Making sure, as Representative Marsh pointed out, that we need to approach adaptation and mitigation in tandem. Thank you. I see the 30-second thing. We need to better integrate conflict-affected countries if we want to do better on global climate change. And we need to look for other opportunities, so we need to enhance the role of women, indigenous populations, youth, and other traditionally excluded populations. We need to really implement climate and energy justice if we want to affect change around the globe.
Thank you much.
Oh, last thing. Reduce fossil fuels eventually to zero. Yes. That is key.
It was in the time, I'll allow it. Next up, Denise.
I think I'll try standing too. Richard and I were talking about we wanted to stand and we didn't, and then Pam started us off. So thank you, Pam, for that. So I think that, with county, there's a lot that hasn't been done in this area. They don't have these conversations, having disbanded the Natural Resources Committee and really not addressing climate at all, not being here. I mean, this says a lot, that here we are, the candidates that are here are candidates being, it's being respectful for candidates to show up. They need to show up and let the voters hear what they have to say, and I think that's, disrespecting the voters. But as far as county goes, I think the most important thing here, the first thing I want to do is to start the conversation. They're just not even talking about climate. That seems to be a dirty word. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of Jackson County residents really want to work on this issue. So I wanted to change the culture in the county commission to talking about this, but not only talking about it, getting to work on it, starting with the climate action plan, trying to catch up. We've got a lot of catch up to do with the county, but there's so much they can do. There's so much they need to do. And as far as my background, I have a background in population health and healthcare and administration. And I want to bring public awareness into the conversation, start public awareness campaigns around these issues.
Thank you much. So that is the end of the SOCAN questions, so we'll be moving on. The next question, this will be at 90 seconds as well. We've already started the conversation on forest. So what can be done at the level you're seeking to help preserve old growth forests? And we'll start with Representative Marsh.
Well, I think the federal government has taken some really important steps to try to stabilize publicly owned old growth forests, and I support those. At the state level, we have passed our really landmark forest accord agreement, which was negotiated a couple of years ago between environmentalists and private forest owners to make sure that we have better protections around creeks, that we have conservation easements that will protect critters. And that was a tremendous step forward for us in really beginning to partner with our private forest owners. So, you know, most of our work really at the state level has been because of the experience of wildfire, around wildfire, and trying to respond to that, trying to stabilize forests so that when they burn, our biggest trees provide the stable presence that really allows the fire to move forward and the trees to remain in place. Because we know that those big trees are really the grounding of the forest, and they are the pillar in times of wildfire. So good forest practices associated with stabilizing forests, minimizing the impact of wildfire, that's really the front of the work at the state level.
Thank you much. Lily?
Is it on? Yeah, no, it's on. Like I said, you gave me a lot of homework. Where are you? Whoever sent me the question. Is it what the question? What I learned is that actually the city of Medford, they developed what they call it in the planning department, they did an evaluation of the potential climate-friendly areas. And I guess there's an order, an OR, and I thought, oh, that's why they're doing it, because they were mandated. But anyway, the truth of the matter is that there is, at least in the city of Medford, there has been some efforts on being more conscious and compliant about diminishing the, to reduce, they have a plan to reduce the state greenhouses emission to a 45%. Which was the record that we had in 1990. And so basically there is some effort being done to create more green areas and create housing in combination where people doesn't have to walk farther. There can be some shops and housing close by in order to avoid the driving, and to me that's helping in little ways. And so, and Metro doesn't know that I'm talking about them, and so they should pay me more money because I am giving me kudos. But there is a plan, and there is a project where they are working at it, and I'm very happy to say that.
Great, thank you much. Thanks, sir.
Can you repeat the question?
Of course. The question was, what can be done at your level that you're seeking to apply for to help preserve old growth forests?
Well, I hate to be the copycat to what Pam was saying, but forest stabilization is absolutely correct. And we are where we are today because of the long history of clear cutting. And when I had some property down in Shasta, Northern California, I had to submit a timber harvest plan. And that required a certain amount of old growth timber have to stay on the property, so many trees per acre. And solutions like that, or I should say restrictions like that, are reasonable when you start trying to balance community health and risk against private property rights. So especially in District 2, where we have a lot of, I don't want to say preppers and back to the earthers and stuff, but these are people who put property rights above everything else. And if they have heavily forested lands that presents a risk to the neighbors, how do you address that? And so at the state level, it's one of these things of making sure that we balance protecting the community against the rights of the individual property owners. And that's a hard nut to crack in Southern Oregon here. But I would definitely say that looking at that in terms of our water issues, because for me, next to the forest, water is number one, because we had, I don't know how many wells ran dry a few years ago because of the drought, and that's going to become more and more common. And every time I turn on my water out of my well, I just am grateful that it still is pumping. So.
Thank you much. Dan Ruby.
Well, the first thing, as I mentioned with the last question, is mitigating climate change on the front end. We are not going to get better again at forests or water without doing that. But specifically, we have half the land in Oregon is public lands, a little over half. 30 million acres of public land, half of that, so 15 million acres, is federal land. We need to protect our federal lands. And I mean, if you've seen Project 2025, the plan is to get rid of the EPA and defang the Forest Service, the BLM, Fish and Wildlife. That's the opposite of protecting our federal lands. On our federal lands, we can be smarter about forest management. So we can do things like intentional burning of underbrush that preserves the old growth crowns. We can do better at planting instead of this clear cutting and then Doug fir growing up all the same age. It's just a fire hazard. And yeah, we can do better forest management based on updated science. Really, the BLM and Forest Service is working off science that's decades old. And we have smarter, newer science, and the way that we access that is working inclusively with partners, including our tribes.
Thank you much. Denise?
Yeah, I think that forest management is going to be critical here. I've had the opportunity to work with the Firewise program. There's some amazing organizations doing good work here. Ashland Fire Resiliency is doing great work. Loma Katsi is out in the forests and doing some really smart management. And they're learning from the native peoples, also going back to how the landscape used to be managed. And now we need to start learning from some of those practices that worked, because our forests need fire, but we also have a whole different kind of fire because of the way that our forests have developed over the last decades. So smart forest management is going to be really important. In county, I would like to be a part of partnering with the Department of Forestry and with the other organizations to do more thinning, clearing out the underbrush, preparing, Ashland has recently been removing dead trees. These kinds of things need to happen. And I think that there is so much private land, there's so much public land. And so really we all are going to have to come together and start working on these things together. I was lucky enough to see a forum back at SOU several years ago where everybody was there, from loggers to environmentalists, and we all shared a common concern, and it was really a great conversation, and they were able to really come up with some steps forward. So I think that's where we need to go.
Thank you much. Lastly, Richard.
This is a two-part question. One is at my level, that's at the state legislature, and the other is old growth forests. I was raised in the logging woods. And if you're serious about climate change, protecting every stick of old growth timber in Southern Oregon is absolutely essential. The old growth has got the diversity to drop seedlings. Many of them will not survive, but those that do can withstand the changes in the climate. And the BLM timber is extremely vulnerable. At my level, I will speak up to this because there's a lot of money in big sticks, and most of those big sticks are over at the beach getting shipped. There's only one mill in Douglas County that can cut a stick over 36 inches. And so I look forward to working with Dan Ruby in Congress and Denise Krause down here in Jackson County, because we need to integrate our positions. And the economic future of this county and this Southern Oregon is not in cutting timber, it's in protecting water, and it's in forests that grow. And the old growth timber has been here since Columbus discovered the place.
Perfect. Thank you much. We'll be moving on to the next question, starting with Luann. Please summarize how your views on environmental protection resemble or differ from your opponent. And Lilia, we'll have you begin.
what I know is, what I don't know much about my opponent. I try not to learn a lot of what she does. I read her bio and everything else. What I'd like to say is that because that climate change has created consciousness on myself, I definitely want to share that with the people that I'm going to serve. And one of the things that I know is that people trust me. I have developed the trust in the community, and that's something that it takes years to develop. And so, again, I go back to the fact that we need to create intentional outreach to the people and let it.
You can continue.
The library will be closing in 10 minutes.
Okay, now I don't know what else I'm going to say. I start all over. No, but you know, that is the base of my foundation, to create awareness, to bring people together, to let them know we can do something about it, even if it's little things by ourselves that might create change, and even in our own house. You know, to me, I see people buying bottles and bottles of water, and I live here for so long that I know that the water that comes out of the faucet is delicious. We don't have to get gallons and gallons of water, you know, because you come from other places where you might think that the water is bad. And see, that's another piece of education, because we have the most delicious water that you can think of. When I go to Mexico, I take my couple gallons with me just to enjoy it for a few more days. I really do. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I go back to reaching out and educating people, basically.
Appreciate it. Next up, we have Tracy.
This is a dream question for me. It is like night and day. So my opponent has actually authored a paper with his father denying climate change and humans' responsibility for that. His whole thing is cut, dig, and drill. And he's running a petition that has gained more than 30,000 signatures, but of those 30,000 signatures, only less than half of 1% have any climate bona fides. So it's just a bunch of climate deniers. And if you want, just so you know, he and I will be in a debate on Thursday night at the Redwood Grange in Grants Pass. My little plug here. And we'll get a chance to actually ask him what his position on the climate is, because his father, Art Robinson, is the one who says it's all hooey, and has published this paper that if you look at the paper, it's kind of like, I think they call them alternate facts. But bottom line is he and I are completely different. I've been a tree hugger since I was 13 years old and picked up my first oil-soaked duck off the coast of California because of an oil slick that came up from Santa Barbara. So I have been an advocate for climate and have followed climate change since the 80s, when people were first starting to get really nervous about it. So yeah, there could not be any more difference between myself and my opponent. So let's talk more.
Thank you much. Dan?
Thank you. As many of you know, Representative Bentz is a water alert and is chair of the subcommittee on water and natural resources. I just sat in this morning on their field hearing on water in Central Oregon. And we both agreed that we need to do better and that we need to support local agreements. However, that's hard to hear when he did not support Great Wall before him, and he did not support the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement. I would support those efforts. He came in with, just this past April, with his bill that would overwrite that. That's the opposite of supporting local agreements that took decades to put into place. He opposes it because he's against dam removal. I am very much for dam removal. My water policy advisor is Craig Tucker from the Yurok tribe. My fish advisor is the lead scientist on the Klamath Dam Removal Project. I very much believe that we need salmon back up to where they belong, and you don't get there without removing dams. In contrast, my top three issues are housing, health, and education. Mr. Bentz's top three issues are stopping dam removal on the Snake River in Washington and Idaho, and that train already left the station. The thing is, now what? I'm in contrast to that. I think we should remove dams. Number two, he wants to delist the wolves as an endangered species, which is something that affects ranchers, but is not on the top line priority list. So that's a contrast.
Perfect. Thank you much. Denise?
May I have your attention, please?
At least it was well timed this time.
Okay. So I wish I could tell you that I know what my opponent's position is on climate, but I have no idea. I've never heard him use the word. I've never heard him talk about anything related to climate or environment at all. And there's very little evidence. He hasn't showed up for anything, so we haven't had any opportunities to really have any meaningful discussions. So, that said, I've been involved in environmental and climate issues since the mid-90s, and I've been very concerned for a long time, and active. I like to get active in community issues, and the environment has always been important to me. I'm now a farmer, a small farmer, and I think that farmers are right on the front lines of climate change. It's very in your face. And so it's not something that we can ignore or avoid. Another thing I want to tell you is that I'm so involved, I care about things. If you care about things, then you care about the environment. So even my son, who I have to tell you is a little Eagle Scout who's just gone to college, his Eagle Scout project was a conservation project even. He was doing restoration in a burn scar along the greenway, replanting native habitat, native vegetation, and taking out the invasive species and all of that. So I'm very proud of him, and I want to continue to make these issues very important. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Richard?
I'm running against a guy named Alex Carlatos. You may have heard that name. He was involved in a famous incident on a train in France. About a month before Christine Goodwin announced that she was going to run for the state senate, making the 4th House seat a vacant seat, his father bought 80 acres a few miles down the road from me. And he has, other than his heroic efforts, which he deserved respect, has never done anything. He's never been on a budget committee, he's never been on a commission, he's never been in a club that I know of. I, on the other hand, have served 28 years on an irrigation district dealing with water rights. I was 15 years on the Partnership for the Umpqua Rivers to restore salmon runs in the Umpqua system. I was instrumental in creating 3 wilderness areas over my lifetime. The Wild Road, the Grassy Knob, and the Rogue Umpqua Divide. I'm working right now for the Crater Lake Wilderness Additions. And this is because of the extreme importance of old growth timber.
Thank you much. Representative March.
Thank you. Well, like some of the others, I don't know what my opposition's position is. I've never met her. She's never shown up. She has not answered calls from reporters, so there's really nothing. I was sitting here looking at Ballotpedias, trying to see if I could find something that I could share with you about her positions, but I just don't know what they are. So all I can do is really talk about my own positions. I've already shared with you that I have served as chair of the Climate, Energy, and Environment Committee. I championed 100% clean electricity. The next thing we did after that, when we saw people dying because of the heat dome, is in the 2022 session, we passed landmark legislation that set up the state's electric heat pump programs, including renter heat pumps, which is a huge, important, and the very first effort that we've made successfully to start investing in rental units, which are often where our most vulnerable individuals live. After that, in 2023, I was able to put together an $85 million climate budget that included a number of important expenditures for programs that we had either in the beginning stages or well developed. Because we were really smart and strategic about how we made our own investments, we set the state up in a great position. We've now received almost $200 million from the federal government in our the climate resilience program there, more than any other state, because we did the homework, we set up the programs, and we're ready to compete.
Thank you much. And thank you much, Library PA System, for keeping us informed as we need to. So we'll be moving on to the next question. This one's a little longer, but candidates run for elective office for a wide variety of reasons, with many issues of importance driving them. Among the issues that you consider most important, where does the climate crisis and environmental protection fall? Please explain. We'll start with Mr. Thompson.
So my platform has basically 5 planks, and I don't necessarily rank them in any particular order, but they are housing, healthcare, education, economic development, and climate change. And I only say them in that order because that's how I can remember them. But in terms of climate change, that is one of the things that represents an existential threat to us. So I mean, obviously, it ranks very, very high. And I forgot the rest of the question, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Senior woman.
Effectively rank your top 3, top 5.
Okay, so climate change is absolutely in the top 3. And the reason it may not be number 1 is because it's a longer term problem, and we have so many acute issues like the healthcare changes that are coming that the Senate has already passed. That's going to be implemented in the next 4 years or so. And housing. We have a massive housing problem. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. And so there are solutions, not only for the transitional housing, but also for long-term housing for families that just simply can't afford to get into an apartment because of the upfront cost. So for me, because of the acuity of the issue, housing is number 1. And then healthcare, because it's that train, that bus is moving. And then finally climate change, but that takes both a much longer term perspective, but it doesn't minimize its importance.
All right, thank you much. Ms. Ruby. Candidates run for elective office for a wide variety of reasons, with many issues of importance driving them. Among the issues that you consider most important, where does addressing climate change and environmental protection fall? Please explain. Ms. Ruby.
So my top 3 issues are homes we can afford, better access to mental health care, and education opportunities. But these are related to climate. And the reason I got into this work is because of climate stuff, indirectly. So after the Alameda fire, I shifted to working for a fire rebuilding nonprofit called Fire Resiliency Collective. And then that turned into working for a federally qualified health center on housing, transitional housing with Health and Human Services for wildfire survivors. And I accepted that job because my then boss, a wonderful person named Christine Winters, framed it as helping climate refugees. She said, the future of healthcare is changing because of climate. It's related to climate. It affects it's the biggest driver for health, and our work is serving climate refugees. And I said, I'm on board, that's great. So they are all related. Housing, I mean, as Representative Marsh pointed out, we lost 2,400 homes overnight, and that directly affects our housing issues here in Southern Oregon. Climate change does. The health issues that we faced at a federally qualified health center because of climate change are huge and growing when we see it's deadly. We are seeing that now in Florida, that it really affects people's well-being. So they are related. And the education part is that it's the number 1 thing we need to be educating kids on with as far as science goes.
All right, thank you much. And Denise?
This is a really hard question for me because I have a hard time ranking what's more important than other things. And especially when we're talking about these issues that are affecting us, the challenges we're all facing here in Jackson County, and they're all so intertwined. You know, when we're talking about mental health and addiction services and an overcrowded jail, and we've got packed problems with the court resources, we've got we've got housing affordability, we've got homeless people, and at the same time, the most important thing really is having a livable planet, you know, and so you can't put that behind everything else, you know, it has to be front and center, because It's about quality of life, and our quality of life is getting, a little bit more challenging each year. Somebody said, I think Lilia said earlier, that she's been here a long time and she didn't have to worry about these things. She didn't have to worry about fire. She didn't have to worry about water. Now I'm worried about these things. Well, I almost had to evacuate recently, and trying to figure out how to do that with 15 animals that didn't want to do that. And that's a challenge. But then I also am very concerned about, I don't think we talk enough about water issues. I know some people do, but generally I don't think we talk about that. And I think we need to, if we don't have that, we can't even be here. So I would say we need to really work on conservation. And so this is in my top issues.
Appreciate it. Richard?
Well, I agree with Denise that the climate change is fundamental and it affects every other issue. So to put a priority on it is pretty difficult. But if you want to restore the fisheries, we need a good watershed, which has to do with forestry. If you're interested in economic development, it's fundamental to economic development, and the smoke that comes from forest fires has shown a tremendous impact on people's health. Well, how much money is that? And how do you get people to move here when they're choked out for 2 or 3 months in the late summer? The water issues are enormous, and right now, as we sit here in Medford, Oregon, there's one of the largest hurricanes in history heading for Tampa. If you think that can't happen here, you better think again. What are we doing about emergency preparedness? The climate is changing, and it is fundamental to the world. The cliche is we got no planet B. And that gets back to what you're talking about, education. People don't realize this. So it's all hooked together, it's integrated. But a changing climate is fundamental to all of it.
Thank you much. Representative Marshall.
Thank you. So I've already shared with you that when I ran in 2016, that I talked about climate change as being my most important priority. But then in 2020, when we had the Alameda fire, I realized that wildfire response and long-term recovery would really be the seminal issue that I would face in my career in the legislature. And we continue to work strongly on the wildfire recovery front. I say this every place I go because it's an important message that we are not yet recovered. We have thousands of people who have not yet had an opportunity to come back to our communities, and we need to continue to carry that message and to do everything that we can with the intention of providing opportunities for those people to come back. That, of course, that wildfire work is a different form of climate work than some of the other efforts that I've been involved in. It's really what happens when things run amok, and how do we survive those experiences. But my work tangential to wildfire recovery has continued to be on the climate front. In the same session where we passed a lot of wildfire work, we did significant work on climate and clean energy. And associated with the experience in wildfire, I have also gravitated to doing a lot of work on the housing front. We know what it's like to lose 300 housing units in a community that is already beset by a housing deficit. And we're seeing that statewide, so doing a lot of work on the housing front that I think really complements the other efforts.
Perfect, thank you much. Lilia?
Okay, so the more I hear every one of you, the more I see and come to the conclusion that everything is intertwined. You can't have one thing without the other one. The priorities that I have is, and guess what, housing. Because one of the things, and we said it again, that we could live in the community. In 2020 we lost over 2,500 homes. We already have a deficit of housing availability. It was like 3 or 4%. And one of the goals that I have, or one of my desires, is to provide housing for working families. We have, we are in the right path. We are building houses, affordable housing, but I'm talking about home ownership, because that gives a different sense in the community, builds wealth. And so the other one that is really, that I wrote my other platform is the high quality childcare. And we don't have enough childcare providers. We can have all the workforce we want, but if we don't have a place to take our kids, then we don't have that people. And the third one is comprehensive mental health services. Not only for the pandemic that we all had struggles, that we all suffer going through that, but then on top of that we get the fires, and we have this and we deal with the people in there. One thing that I want to add that the smoke has created an impact economically in the arts. The Oregon Chicks Festival, I don't know how many millions they lost, and also the Brick Festival, they have to cancel some of the games. So it's going to affect us economically, locally, and that's really important to be addressed.
Perfect, thank you. This next question is labeled specifically for the congressional nominee, but I do believe everyone should be able to answer, or have a chance to answer this question. Major efforts are underway to remove dams on the Snake River to improve habitat for salmonoid species. Where do you stand on dam removal generally, and on Snake River particularly, and please explain why?
Yeah, I'm very pro dam removal. We need salmon back up where they used to be. Our economies have depended on our fisheries for thousands of years, and we need those fish back. So I'm pro dam removal. I guess I can go a little bit longer on that. It's part of a new vision for water security. Like Richard said, it's related to our forests, it's related to our wildlife. Water is fundamental to life, literally. Everybody knows that water literally is fundamental to life. And I think that we need to really have a comprehensive plan for healthy waterways that dam removal is central to. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you much. Denise?
Okay. So I have been following, not so closely, the Snake River, but the Klamath River, the dam removal, and I also agree that we really need to be protective of the environment of our salmon and being able to get up the stream, up the river. This isn't going to be something that affects me as a county commissioner here, but it certainly was pivotal to county commissioners in Klamath. And so I would say, I just have to say, I tend to err on the side of protecting our resources and really remembering that water is crucial and we need to do everything. It's a very, it's not an infinite resource. And it's not a renewable resource. We need to really take care of it the best way we possibly can.
Thank you much. Richard?
Well, thank you for asking me that. We have a dam in Douglas County, the Winchester Dam, and it is extremely controversial. It's not in my district, so I've been trying to maintain a little dignity, but it's not easy. This dam was a whole series of state agencies gave them permits late one Friday, too late to get an injunction, and they were ready to drain the water and do a bunch of work that is now suspect. This dam will be removed. And these dams were all built back when these streams were full of fish. You want to catch a trout, go to the nearest ditch. That was a long time ago. And in my lifetime, I've seen going to the Coquille River and catching 4 or 5 Chinook, you can't fish for Chinook in the Coquille anymore. The tribes are doing some things, but they want to go down and catch striped bass. And removing the dams is only part of it. We need to restore the watershed and think about where this water comes from. Because water is important for a few creatures besides the fish.
Thank you much. Representative Marsh?
Thank you. I think whenever we can remove dams and restore waterways in a responsible way, we should do that. What's gone on in Klamath is phenomenal. The removal of those 4 dams over the last couple of years. Has anybody gotten to go and look at it? I have not yet. I'm dying to go and look at it. And we are seeing dam removals in other settings as well. Even on our smaller streams, there's another dam up toward Roseburg, the Winchester Dam, that a lot of people are advocating for the removal of. I think it's important to acknowledge that on some of the bigger projects like the Snake, there is a lot of sensitivity around the impact on hydro. Our COUs, our community-owned utilities, depend on the BPA system, which pulls electricity off from a series of dams. I think the dams that are being targeted for removal are in fact not significant to the system. I think the system can move on and function. But we do have to be sensitive to the fact that these dams and the hydro that comes off of them are probably providing in the state of Oregon out of the BPA system 25% of our electricity. So we have to move carefully, we have to look at the science, we have to bring people together, and we have to sort of take it one step at a time.
Perfect. Thank you much. Lilia?
I didn't. I think one of the things that I need to remember that a lot of the states that we have, I think it's important to try to get it back to the original state. The removal of the dams could be one of those factors. Thank you, Pam, for sharing the fact that we also need to consider that we are being using energy out of that. So there's got to be a balance in how we do this, so everybody is safe. We definitely want to, I think it's important to also to remember that we want to get back to the land the way the original were, at least as much as possible, and still get use out of it. That's all I can say about that.
Perfect. Thank you much. Tracy?
I remember when they took out some dams in the Rogue River, my sister and brother-in-law, who used to jet ski up there, were livid. And to me, it comes down to the two camps. There are people who want recreational purposes and people who really want to create that, restore what was. I'm a firm believer that we need to go back to what was. Now, the only challenge I see there, and by the way, when I told the League of Oregon, or the Oregon League of Conservation voters, we need to tear down some dams which will negatively impact hydro, they thought I was crazy. But when I explained to them that it was not trying to eliminate hydro at all, but in addressing the fisheries issue. But even if we take these dams down, there's no guarantee that the fisheries are going to spring back. California canceled its salmon fishing season 2 years in a row. In 1990, the cod fisheries off the coast of Canada collapsed. So we need to look at this beyond just taking out a couple dams that is going to really help the fisheries issue. And this gets back to our water resource allocations. And so yeah, it's one of these issues. I'm all for removing the dams so that we can get the salmon spawning upstream again. But it's going to be a long-term process, and most folks can't think beyond the next election or even the next quarter if they're a business person. So we have to take a much longer perspective on how this is going to be restored.
Great, thank you much. Moving on to the next question. This was directed toward the commission. Again, I think it could apply to everyone, but feel free to pass it if you feel it doesn't. So for Denise, does the county have anything approaching a climate and energy plan? If not, how do you think you would stimulate the commission into developing one? If so, how could it be improved?
As far as I know, there's not, unless it's been happening very recently, that there isn't a climate energy plan for the county. But I would prioritize that, as I said earlier. And how would I go about that? So, it is tricky to work in a commission with only 3 people. I hate to have to say that, but it is, because you can't really talk to them. And so you have some limitations there. But what I'm running for now is also transparency. And so I think bringing these issues, bringing this up repeatedly in public meetings and pushing for this, and so that, we're accountable, that the commission is accountable to the people, and also opening up for public input and being open to receiving that. Currently, that's not really happening. There's a few people making decisions behind closed doors, and that I want to change that whole culture to open that up and let's start having the conversation. Let's invite the public into the conversation, and we'll just start some really nice momentum towards doing the right thing in developing this climate action plan.
Thank you much. Richard.
This is the 4th or 5th time I've heard Denise Krause speak. I think she would make a brilliant county commissioner with a real impact throughout Southern Oregon. We have similar problems in Josephine County and similar problems in Douglas County. I'd love to see this woman be elected. But I want to change the subject to some dams I'm in favor of. Beaver dams. You don't need an EIS. You don't need to put up any monies. Just plant willows along the trees. It's the perfect habitat for the fish. It holds water back. When the rivers get muddy, they pause behind the dams and settle. If you know what you're looking at, you can go out and see draws and ranch properties, and there's these little terraces in the creeks, and they all have a rounded front. Beaver dams held that soil. It's prime topsoil. They're wonderful creatures. And the people that, I should say the people, the first Europeans that came to Oregon were here to catch beavers. And it's an incredible resource. They're hardworking, diligent little creatures, unless you have orchard down by the river. And I think that's something that we should be talking about. This is the beaver state, for crying out loud. And beavers build dams very simply, quickly, and cheaply. I strongly support beaver dams.
We appreciate it. Representative Marsh.
Well, I don't have anything to say on Denise's question, but I'm all over Richard's answer. And let me just say, one of my favorite bills that we passed in the last long session was a bill to protect beavers. We moved beavers from oversight from the Department of Ag to ODF&W. We are requiring private landowners who are encountering beavers to call up ODFW and talk over what their alternatives might be. They can still kill that beaver if they must kill the beaver, but we want to start engaging people in understanding the incredible value as a climate creature, as a habitat element, as a protection during wildfires that beavers can provide. And next session, we're going to run again a bill that we ran in '24 that didn't pass, but it will pass next year, called Living with Beavers, and it will provide $1.5 million for those same private landowners who encounter a beaver and need to wrap trees or make little investments on their landscape to get some money and support for doing that. Because if we're going to ask them to approach beaver in a less lethal way, we also need to give them the support for doing that. So I was just making a note, talk about beavers, and you gave me the whole entry point.
Perfect, thank you much. Lilia, if you'd like to talk about either beavers or climate resilience projects. The original question was, does the county have anything approaching a climate and energy plan, and the details for that? It could even be a city or beavers, as we
No, I'm not sure about beavers. I'm not very familiar. You know, I'm not from this country. But you guys are. You know everything about them. Anyway, but you're right. I do know that this is a beaver state. As far as I know. I'm not sure that, you know, one thing that I heard from Denise said is transparency. Transparency about how you do your service. And to me, that is essential in everything that we do. It doesn't matter if it's our private life, if it's our family life, or it's politics. And so I feel real strong about being transparent and also, you know, get the input from the community that elect you. Because as an elected official, you are there to serve the community, not yourself.
Perfect, thank you much. Tracy.
I'm just going to make one comment on beavers, and that's because I was on faculty at Oregon State University. So that should tell you everything you need to know about me and beavers.
Thank you much, Dan.
So part of the reason that I ran is because as I was doing work in housing, I came across a couple barriers in my column of government from myself up to the president. So we have a great school board, we have a great city council, we have a not great county commission, and we have a great state rep in Pam Marsh, and we have great senators at the federal level, and we have a not great federal U.S. representative, and then great above that. And so to Denise's point, one of the things, I'm going to wrap this back around, but I appreciate Representative Marsh talking about the sensitivity to dam removal. It's a carrot and stick thing where we need to help folks. A lot of those are dams that are no longer producing as much as they were. They're outdated, they're old, and they weren't built with fish passage really in mind as well as we would do now. So helping folks adapt, really funding infrastructure. So funding infrastructure so we can diversify at a community level, the consumer-owned utilities, into solar and wind and new hydro that accounts for fish passage. And we aren't going to do that unless we fund it at the county level. So really funding back down from the federal down to the county level to make sure that this stuff can actually be implemented is something that would be important to me.
Perfect, thank you much. The next question is a little long-winded, so I'll probably have to repeat it, but neither the US nor the Oregon Constitution guarantees us the right to a clean and healthy environment. A statewide coalition is seeking to introduce a ballot measure that would add a guarantee to the Oregon Constitution as the Environmental Rights Amendment. Please explain where you stand on this idea and whether you would support this legislation as proposed. Oh, and we're beginning with Richard. My apologies.
I'm a little bit familiar with this. It's community rights, and it's to give mountains and rivers and lakes the same rights as people. Without looking through the fine print, I'm not willing to jump up here and say I'm in favor of it, but it's a good direction. And we need to recognize that our lives are transitory, and here today and gone tomorrow. And I realize this more every day, where these streams and these mountains and the creatures that live there are here for a long, long time. And we need to have an economy that works, but so much of our economy is extractive. And we need to look at why the people who speak for extractive industries get elected, and then they go after why people live here. So I'm willing to think about it, but as a legislator, we need to read the fine print before we start changing the Constitution.
Thank you much. Representative Marsh.
Well, we could have a whole forum on this question and the initiative just to educate all of us. My understanding of the initiative is not quite like Richard's. I don't think it's about imbuing special protections of the environment, but it's about putting people's rights to live in a safe and healthy environment into the Constitution. If this moves forward and comes in front of me, in front of the legislature, I will support it. I will say I'm a little skeptical that it will solve all of our problems. We have a constitutional amendment now that is around health care and our right to health care. It hasn't actually produced much that's very hands-on for any of us. We have seen some examples in Montana where some of the children's rights around climate, those efforts have been upheld because there's something in the Montana Constitution that gives us a base for protecting those kids' efforts. So there may be some value in this. I think it's important. I worry that we get distracted by campaigns and arguments and money, and what we still have is just a bunch of words on a piece of paper, and that serves as a distraction from actually doing and passing important programs that have an immediate effect on the environment. So I'll support it. I'm not going to point to it as being the end-all be-all.
Perfect, thank you much. Louise?
I think we all have the right to be happy, and I know that is in the Constitution. Actually, I have it here with me because I wanted to read it. And somebody mentioned, the Constitution says that we all have the right to be happy. And one of the things that I believe is for the people to be happy, we have to have a roof over our heads. We have to be able to eat healthy food and also live in a very healthy environment. So I like what you said, that you gotta read the small print before you say yes or sign your name in anywhere. And so I will read about it, and more than likely will support it. Thank you.
Thank you much. Teresa?
In general, I support any legislation that improves the quality of life as related to our environment. But like Richard said, I mean, I spent 40 years looking at contracts, and the devil is in the details. And so what I would be concerned about are unintended consequences of passing a constitutional amendment. But despite that caveat, I would be all for holding people to task who are polluting our environment. And I think part of that comes from the fact that we have to support our businesses and our economy. But on the other hand, businesses have gotten off too scot-free for far too long, where the taxpayers are left with the bill. I call that a miner's arrangement, where the companies get the gold, the taxpayers get the shaft.
Perfect, thank you much. Dan?
So between the Declaration and the Constitution, we lost the right to happiness part, but I do think that we have the right to be healthy and whole. And that's not captured adequately. I wouldn't oppose a constitutional amendment, but I echo Representative Marsh in that it seems like it's potentially a lot of effort that could be invested into action instead. And so I think I have a similar position, and that I would support it and not want to let it divert away from doing the work. I'm always likewise leery when we get caught up in letting perfect be the enemy of good, and I'd rather do the work and have it be imperfect and complex and messy and iterative and fail forward, fail fast, fail often, than spending a lot of time in trying to perfect language. It's a lot of work to do constitutional amendments.
Thank you much. Denise?
Well, the concept of having clean air and clean water seems to be pretty basic right to me. I grew up when I could actually drink out of a mountain stream and not have to worry about it. And I hate that my son doesn't live in an environment like that. And I worry about him, and I worry about future generations. And how are we leaving this with them? And I think that we need to do better. I've seen young people, they're standing up and they're saying, hey, this is our future. And I'm disturbed by the fact that just a couple of days ago, it was a few days ago, that young people went to an Ashland City Council meeting, and they spoke up. They're begging for attention to their climate, their issues with the climate, and they want to be heard. And then I heard a county commissioner in a meeting this week really making fun of them about how it was they're saying all this about their future and really talking down about that. And I'm thinking, but it is their future. You had your chance, and they deserve their chance. And I don't think that we need to discount what our young people are concerned about. I think we need to do everything we can to help make this place better for them.
Thank you much. Perfect. Moving on to the next question. Again, feel free to adapt this. What are the biggest obstacles to the Rogue Valley becoming more green? It's for Representative Marsh.
Why do I get the hardest first questions? I think there are different, certainly we start off by saying, well, what does more green mean? One of those things I think it means is having more renewable energy available to our communities. And certainly with the intermittent power that we've experienced in many communities across the county this year, we've realized how important it is for us to have some independence from the grid, to be able to control our own power sources, so that in times of emergency that we can actually take care of ourselves. So the obstacles there are really funding and implementing renewable energy. We also have some state obstacles in terms of the ability of local communities to use installations for their own benefit. Right now, there's some state law that we need to change to make that more easily possible. You know, moving to a green grid is just really a matter of investment and collaboration with the utilities. Most of our county is served by Pacific Power. Pacific Power is struggling right now because they are trying to figure out how to get on top of the wildfire risks that are front and center in front of them. We need to help them move past that so that they can begin to really invest in the renewable grid that will then continue to serve our community.
Thank you much. Lillian?
Well, I go back to how I started. It has to do with education, creating awareness, little by little. And one of the things that, Pam Marsh mentioned is about collaboration. I think it's important that we start helping each other instead of working against each other, and see what is it that you have that I can use to make this place greener. I understand the fact that, yeah, we can make change or heat pump, right? But one of the things that I know is that we also need to find out on the people who cannot afford to get those things. How are we gonna help those families? How are we gonna help those people that don't have the money to come up with? And I know there are programs out there, but it still has to do with educating them and say, yeah, you know, you can qualify for this, but how can you be out of your pocket $7,000? It's just not feasible. So we need to find ways to get a hold of those families too and educate them regarding how can they be helped to make this greener and for the future generations, the people who's behind us, and leave a better place for them.
Thank you much. Tracy?
So I think all of our alternative sources of energy is first and foremost the way we can make District 2 green. The challenge with that is we have so much forested land. We don't have like high desert as they do in Eastern Oregon. So we don't get these massive days that have 10, 13, 14 hours of sun. So we have to look at a combination of ways of producing energy. Everything from wave power, where they have condensers out in the ocean that just bob up and down, to wind, to solar, to who knows what, maybe micronuclear even. Some people are like, what the heck? But anyway, the point is that that's how we can make the county greener. On one hand, quite honestly, I would like to see passenger rail between Ashland and Eugene, so we get some of those cars off the road. I would love to see more freight handled by rail rather than semis. You get 10 times the amount of freight for the same energy inputs. I mean, these are more radical ideas that would take 10, 15, 20 years to implement. But I think we need to think radical. And when you start saying, think outside the box, tell yourself, no, there is no box. There are no limits. If we're going to make the kind of radical changes necessary to affect real change in terms of greening our region, you got to be a little on the crazy side. And I guess that's why I'm running.
Appreciate it, thank you. Dan?
I think there are two major barriers to greening the Rogue Valley. One is economic, and thankfully we have folks like Representative Marsh that are doing things like funding OHA to do the low-hanging fruit of helping people weatherize and helping our vulnerable populations do that stuff. So, but the money thing is huge, and we are not going to get to more municipal scale, smarter, more forward-thinking utilities without heavy investment in it. So I think that needs to come down from the federal and state levels. The other big barrier is with our commissioners, really honestly, is that we have had commissioners that are very obstructive to progress, and hearing that story about those youth who it's very near and dear to me being made fun of is just indicative of that.
Thank you much. Denise?
Okay, yeah, I think that obviously funding is going to be a big challenge. There's a lot of competition for funding, but I'm thinking of transportation specifically. There's a huge shortfall in transportation funding, and I was going to talk about rail too. I would love to see the commuter train between Ashland and Grants Pass, and hydrogen-powered train or something would be really nice. it's going to be expensive and costly. I knocked on somebody's door last night in Butte Falls, and she told me, we want to train, to Butte Falls and through this scenic pass. And they're actually a group of historical society people actually talking about that. So that was interesting. But I also think that the problem is that we cannot solve today's problems with yesterday's thinking. And we have this commission that is really old ideas. We need status quo. We haven't had new ideas for a long time, or be open to that. And that's what I want to bring into the commission, is not only to bring new ideas that I have, but mainly knowing that bringing in your ideas too, we can really come up with some creative solutions. I think another obstacle here is going to be special interests. They have quite a bit of power here in the county, and we want to make some decisions that are bold, new ideas that are building towards a better future. And that's why I really want to be county commissioner, and I really want to start to do this work.
Thank you much. Richard?
Well, gee, I want to talk about passenger rail service too, but since Tracy and Denise stole that from me, let's talk about something else. One of my oldest buddies, Andy Kerr, wrote a piece last fall about why polling shows the general public is overwhelmingly in favor of a clean environment, of restoring the fish, there was one thing with these clear cuts, they're hideous. Why do we do this? One of the reasons why is the extractive industries form associations that will get involved in politics. And I'm going to go back to Douglas County and advocate that we set up a political action committee that nonprofits can get involved in. The nonprofit status is precious and valuable. It should be protected. But there's no reason that the nonprofits can't participate as people in a political action committee to put the money up that it takes to win elections. If you have an issue you care about, the elections are where the rubber meets the road. And we have the same idiots in the Douglas County Commission that you guys have down here. It's because the loggers and the miners and the rip-offs and the real estate developments put up the money to win elections. If you want to win elections, you got to put up the money.
Thank you much. All right. The next question will be for Lillian, regarding workforce development. One of the most prevalent talking points levied against most environmental packages is concerns over the loss of gainful employment. The Infrastructure Reduction Act has already created 1,500 clean jobs, with the White House estimating 2 million more jobs over the next decade. Respecting the position of climate justice advocates, how do we ensure that the clean energy transition will not leave anyone behind in terms of workforce development?
You thought you got the hard one? Okay, is there any way you can repeat that question that in a slower pace?
Yes.
In Spanish?
No, I would not understand.
No one will understand it if I try and do it in
See, I
Spanish. One of the most prevalent talking points levied against most environmental packages is concerns over the loss of gainful employment. The Infrastructure Reduction Act has already created clean energy jobs, with more on the way. Respecting the position of climate justice advocates, how do we ensure that the transition to clean energy doesn't leave anyone behind?
Okay, well, we have to be inclusive. There's my answer. And we have to, I know that you say there's no box, but we have to think beyond the box and be inclusive, make sure that we don't leave people who hasn't been reached out and bring them with us. Because if you don't do the reach out, you're only gonna bring the people that you see, but you have to go beyond that. So let's make sure that, first of all, make sure that people know that it's happening, that these jobs are available. Do the marketing, do the outreach publication in any language or any way they can get, and then promote it. And make sure when you're doing your selection that you are being equal, you are practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because it's real easy to get the top performers and forget about the ones that might not be performing. But there's also an opportunity. You know, people grow in jobs. I did, and I'm still growing. So you have to think beyond the box. I'm sorry I used it. Yeah.
That's exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you much. Tracy?
You already threw away the box, that's great. So I'll probably not get a lot of support with this position, but I'll tell you right now, there's one that I struggle with greatly, since economic development is a key plank in my platform. I've also spent a number of years working on artificial intelligence. And so what we have seen over the last 18 months is nothing shorter than the next industrial revolution. And it is going to fundamentally change the way our workforce exists. If you look at some of the big investment banks, they see as much as between 40 and 80% job reduction. So it's a real tough problem because we already have an underskilled workforce in our area. And so what do you do with an underskilled workforce that doesn't have the resources to think critically so they can write engineered prompts for the new artificial intelligence agents that are going to take all those low-level jobs? So I don't know that I really have an answer at this point. It's something I struggle with. It keeps me up at night because I get the latest AI news every day. And what people are reading about on the mainstream media, you have no idea what's coming down the pipe. And the rich people are going to have robots. And us poor folks, and we're going to be kind of left behind. So AI is coming. We have to embrace it. We have to prepare ourselves for it. And as far as workforce development, we're going to have to modify what we expect.
Thank you much. Dan?
As Richard pointed out, we need to have a just transition from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And as Lilia pointed out, that we get there with inclusion, having more folks at the table. Very specifically in Oregon, we have some models for shifting workforce. I'm very inspired by some of the work that Lomakatsi does in next generation forestry with a lot of benefits. You know, our industry wants to adapt because that's how we sustain our energy. Agriculture wants to adapt. Agriculture, by its nature, is sequestering carbon and feeding people. It also is using a lot of water. So we need to evolve our industry, and we are not going to evolve our industry unless we really heavily fund innovation. And so I think funding innovation in forest and agriculture is huge. I do want to build on something that Tracy said. I'm leery of AI because of the very high energy cost and accordingly, that's carbon cost. That just goes like this the more and more we use that. So I'm not sure how to solve that one yet. I'm not sure asking AI to solve its own problem I'm comfortable with. So.
Perfect, thank you. Denise?
Okay, so as we all know, we have unaffordable housing. Housing costs are too high, and wages are relatively low. So we have a problem here in Jackson County, and I really would like to focus on how to bring in new and better green jobs. And you know, we got to start thinking that box, you know. But let's think creatively. Let's come together and think creatively. People need better jobs. They need to make more money. They need to have a better quality of life. And we all have all these environmental problems, and I'll just throw out some kind of an idea. It's not fleshed out. And, but anyway, so we know that we have all this marijuana being grown all over the county. So, and it's illegal, and it's not doing a lot of good for our economy. But what if we had incentives for people to grow hemp instead, and then we had jobs where we could process hemp and build, you know, make products out of hemp, and we could reduce the microplastics. So we would start addressing, you know, some of the jobs issues, the economic issues, but also the environmental issues. And, you know, that's just to start a conversation, and then let's see what we can come up with. So I think that when we do this kind of thing, if we can bring in new and better jobs, then we need to build in the training on the front end to retrain or to train people to step into those jobs.
Thank you much. Richard?
Well, I think this is actually one of the more profound questions that we've had tonight. And the solutions aren't obvious. One of the serious problems that people who advocate for the environment face is that there's a huge number of young people in Southern Oregon that see the environmentalists as destroying their opportunities. And I think that some of the points you've made, Leila, about education and inclusion are really something we need to think about. That a green economy is a good job, and it's not going to just evaporate. The other thing is that the timber industry has automated the logging woods. They do it with machines. The timber industry has automated the mills and shut a bunch of them down. And so automation is a reality right now. But the young people blame the spotted owl, and they blame intellectuals in colleges that don't know how it is down here where I'm trying to get new wheels on my Jeep. This is of profound importance that we really need to show the young people that there is opportunity, that there are jobs, that their wisdom is of value, and quit.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you much. Representative Marsh?
Thank you. Well, one of the things that we have done at the state level is that we worked really hard to reach out to labor and to get their support or partnership on new initiatives at the state level. When we passed House Bill 2021, which I referred to a few times tonight, which is our 100% clean electricity, the bill includes very significant labor standards. And as a result, when we came for a vote, we had wide support, or at least neutrality, from most of the labor unions. Not all of them, but most of them, to the extent that there weren't obstacles for us to look at there. Those labor standards were really important. And because we wanted to get them even a little better, we went back the subsequent year and ran another piece of legislation to see if we could fix some of the gaps in the labor standards that people were still wanted work on. In 2024, in the session in February, we passed some work around offshore wind. That is a quickly changing dynamic. But again, that legislation contained some very high labor standards, very similar actually to the labor standards that we'd had in 2021. And we stand by those labor standards. We're going to start developing renewable hydrogen. The state is in partnership with the state of Washington to develop renewable hydrogen hubs. That's green renewable hydrogen. And we, once again, as that new technology moves forward, everything that the state does will include labor standards, because that's part of what we do.
Perfect. Thank you much. That is all the questions we have, so we'll now turn to the closing remarks. We will start with Dan Ruby and work our way back down this way. All candidates will have 2 minutes for their closing remarks.
Great, thank you. So I want to bring a new vision for security, climate security. Climate change is the biggest threat facing global security. It's not just a national security issue, it's a global security issue. And if we want a stable, sustainable future, we need to address it head on with drastic action. The Paris Accords are not enough. We're seeing that. We're seeing that in action in Florida right now. We are seeing warming surpassing what we anticipated, and we're not doing enough to mitigate it. So my vision for climate security includes comprehensive water and in our area, comprehensive water and forest management plans. It includes a holistic approach. We've talked about that. Decisive climate action, commitment to investing in technology and innovation. We've talked about that, including jobs in a new Green Deal, and ecosystem restoration. We need to commit to that. My commitment is to community engagement, so that's inclusive policy development. I'm committed to involving all stakeholders, local governments, farmers, environmental groups, tribes, residents in the process to make sure that our solutions are equitable and effective, and transparency and accountability. So our community deserves transparency and accountability from its representatives, and I will ensure and commit to regular updates and open dialogues about our progress and challenges in achieving this security.
Perfect, thank you much. Tracy?
So I got into this race because I was triggered by the lack of action by our current state senator, who is now, whose son is now seeking to replace him. And when I realized that the option is more of the same, or as I say, this guy went to the Nancy Reagan School of Politics, just say no, that I realized that I can do better. I've got 40 years of international business experience. I've run my own companies. I have traveled the world and see the damage that climate change is doing. We do not know what squalor is, but there are a lot of places around the world where they live in squalor. And I want to make sure that we have a planet that's not just here for my grandkids, their grandkids. It's got to go on hundreds of generations. And the problem is, I don't know if we're at the tipping point or if we've crossed the tipping point, but irrespective of where we are, you know, they say the best time to start change was yesterday, the second best time to affect change is today. And I'm a non-conventional candidate. I think you probably figured that out. My goal is, even if I don't win, to make some noise in this election, and that's one of the things I want to do when I have my debate with my opponent on Thursday, is highlight some of this just say no attitude towards the climate that's adversely impacting our communities, and not just our communities, communities all around us, because the coal plants in China don't keep the soot in China. So, and everyone says, well, why should we do it first? No one else will do it. Well, someone has to take the lead. And I've never been the one to go second. So I think that Oregon should take the lead on climate change, just like we're taking the lead on single-payer health care. Vote for Tracy.
Thank you much. Lillian?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for the opportunity. Like I said at the beginning, I learned a lot by doing all this reading, and I think I can be the voice for the Southern Oregon. I have run for the school board for my third term, and one of the reasons I ran is because I believe I'm passionate about education. And I think these 3 terms has been helping me to prepare for something bigger where I can be the voice of my community. I have first knowledge of what the needs are here. And I understand that once I'm in Salem, you know, I am gonna be us, because I'm not just gonna be speaking for Southern Oregon. And so I will collaborate, I will listen a lot and learn and, you know, speak up a lot when I see the things are not the way they should be. And I think I can do that. And so that's the reason I said yes to run for this position. And I think it was time. I answered the call basically because I was asked like 3 times. And don't correct me, Tanya, it was 3 times. So I believe I'm ready. You know, I'm ready for the next step, whatever it might be. And I have trust in myself because I have a lot of integrity, and that's how I'm gonna work. Thank you.
Thank you much. Dan?
So as you know, I'm running for my 5th term. I've been honored to have this job. I have been grateful for voters supporting me to do the work, and I hope I have stepped up for all of you in some way or another over this time. I thought I'd spend most of my 2 minutes telling you what I expect to start working on, what I have been working on, and what I expect to gear up for the 2025 session, just in a quick, rapid listing. We are working on microgrids to make sure that local communities can actually have access to the power and some independence from the larger grid in times of emergency or otherwise. We are working on the impact of data centers. We are seeing data centers across the landscape eating up all of our electricity to the point that we are not going to have enough power for ourselves, much less renewable power. So we are passing legislation to make sure that data centers at least pay their own way and don't shift the costs of the expansion onto consumers. is what will happen otherwise. We are working on wildfires and utilities to make sure that individuals who suffer from wildfire have an equitable opportunity to be made whole rather than going to court. We are also concerned that the utilities, both big and small, as well as other institutions like our insurance companies, actually can stay whole and continue to service after a disaster hits. That's important. We're working on a number of other different realms. Continuing on wildfire, we're working to make sure that Phoenix Talent School Districts has the ability to continue to thrive as we move forward in recovery. We are working on housing fronts, working on housing innovation with different kinds of materials. We are working on the shelter system to get it stable. We are working on manufactured housing because people who live in parks are seeing increases in rents that they cannot bear, and we've got to fix that. We are working on housing for seniors. Oh, sorry, stop. Because seniors are the demographic showing up most in our shelter system. So that gives you an idea of what I'm going to be involved in if I get reelected.
Appreciate it. Thank you much. Richard?
Well, I'd like to say thank you to the Southern Oregon Climate Action Network. I appreciate the opportunity to come down and talk to you people. It's been an honor to be in this panel and sit among so many distinguished people. And by now you must have realized that I can be a loudmouth. It's a fact. I blame my mother, but that's another story. But I'm also, I've been a realtor for 25 years, and the last 10 or 15 years I was increasingly involved in commercial real estate. Very complex. You're dealing with powerful individuals that don't give in. And I have learned how to negotiate with people. I got in this election to win it. I don't want to come in second. I think my opponent is completely unready to show up in the legislature and do anything but have lunch on the lobbyists. I've got some issues that I want to see done, and I'm prepared to make my point, but I'm also prepared to negotiate. And I hope someday, once elected, I'm half as polished as you are, Pam. But we need more negotiation, and so many of these issues are entrenched, and we need to break free of that. We need to break free of the tribalism between the Democrats and the Republicans. We're rural Oregonians, and we all have a lot in common, and the state needs to hear from us. And the thing is when you talk to people, my friends in Portland, they have a very romantic idea of living in Southern Oregon. and I wish it was so. But as I said, I got in this race to win it. And I have learned a ton from the people that I talked to. And I thank you very much.
Thank you much. Next up, Denise.
Well, I love the Rogue Valley, and I guess I am an impatient person. I like to see action, and we have so many issues going on in the county. We've talked about them, we've mentioned them today, and I'm not seeing the progress. 2 years ago, I ran for the first time against Rick Dyer, and I knocked on doors, and I heard from people what was important to them. And it's not changed. Nothing has changed. I'm hearing the same thing. And I'm just seeing too much inaction. I will be a different kind of commissioner, one that I think I can easily say I'm going to work twice as hard. I'm really ready. I'm ready for the challenge. I am definitely the most qualified candidate in this race. And I bring the skills and experience to do the work. I started out looking at what does a county commissioner do, and it was like, well, that was a pretty good question. Nobody really seems to know, but then I started to look at that, and of course they manage a big budget and do other things with policy, but I realized, what could a county commissioner do? And they have the position and the opportunity to do a whole lot more. And I want the Rogue Valley to be a better and better place to live for all of us and for those to come. And for that, I'm going to keep pushing. I mean, I guess I'm a pretty persistent, determined person, and I really believe in doing the right thing. I will fight against special interests. I will demand transparency and accountability. I will stand up for the taxpayers because we are all paying taxes, and I see that we pay more and more taxes and our services get cut. And this isn't right, and the reason I'm running is to be a public servant. I want to put service back into public service, and I want to work for the people of Jackson County, and I want to make it a place that my son wants to come home to.
Perfect, thank you much. That concludes the question portion of tonight's programming. We are about 3 minutes late, but we did take a very important beaver-related detour, so I think I'm okay with that. So Richard got ahead of me, but can we get a round of applause for our candidates? Event. As you have seen across the room, each of the candidates has a place. We'll be here until 8:30. I encourage you to ask questions. Be respectful is something that is always useful to be reminded of. So make sure you're allowing other people in the group to have a chance to ask a question, and please enjoy that space. I'd also like to do a reminder that October 15th is the last day to register to vote. So if you have not registered, please check the Oregon Vote website. Please also check to make sure that you're registered, even if you think you did it. It's always something you don't want to find out in November. A recording of tonight's video will be available on Friday. Fingers crossed that I get the editing done. This will be available soon, and you'll see it on the SOCAN website. Thank you all so much for being here, and we appreciate your time.